Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to present to you today Asking the Right Questions, an analysis of Ask-A-Librarian transcripts. We're coming to you today from the University of Florida. UF is a Tier 1 research institution serving undergraduate and graduate students, faculty, staff, and researchers. We have the largest academic library system in the state with 7 branch libraries serving different subject areas. In the photos on this slide, you can see some of our beautiful campus here in Gainesville, Florida. On the top is Library West, which is the library you see in most of our campus photos. And below that is Library East, our historic library. I'll start off our introductions. My name is Pauline Bickford-Klein, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm an e-resources specialist in the Acquisitions and Collections Services Department. I manage database and journal subscriptions for the social sciences and humanities budget centers, as well as the smaller libraries such as education, music, and architecture and fine arts. I've been involved with usability testing and assessment at the libraries since January 2021, when I joined the usability committee to do some testing on our new library website.
Hi, I'm Doug Kiker, and I use the pronouns he, him, and I work alongside Pauline as an electronic resource specialist in the Acquisitions and Collections Services Department as well. I handle the database and journal subscriptions for our business, multidisciplinary, and special collections and area studies budget centers. I've been with the University of Florida Libraries in a number of capacities for a little over 20 years, and I was brought into this project about halfway to assist with the chat transcript analysis.
Hi, I'm Christy Shorey. I use the she, her pronouns. I am the circulation team leader in our access and resource sharing department. Many of the interactions patrons have with the library center around accessing our resources, so many of the questions from the Ask-A service are relevant to our work. Like Doug, I am one of the newer additions to this project, though I have previous experience with conducting usability testing.
I'd also like to acknowledge some of the other contributors to this project. The original project began with 4 committee members overseen by assessment librarian Laura Spears. Over the course of a few months, 3 of the original members all left the libraries for other opportunities. As the chair of the subcommittee, I recruited 2 new members in early 2022, Doug and Christy, who are presenting with me today. There have been a few other important contributors to the project, including David Carnell, Assessment Program Specialist, who was responsible for collecting and distributing a random set of 100 transcripts each month and anonymizing them for our analysis. This involves significant manual labor in removing names from transcript text. The committee also met and communicated regularly with Val Minson, Assistant Dean of Assessment and Student Engagement, and Robin Fowler, Ask-A-Librarian Coordinator, to share recommendations. The Ask-A-Librarian Transcript Analysis Group was formed as a subcommittee of the overarching Assessment Advisory Committee, which manages and advises on a number of projects related to usability testing and assessment in the libraries. While our subcommittee had guidance from assessment professionals, such as assessment librarian Laura Spears, the committee members themselves were not necessarily assessment experts. I joined the subcommittee with experience in usability testing from prior library projects, but with no formal training. And for some members, this was their first foray into library assessment. The committee charge was to review 100 de-identified Ask-A transcripts monthly and share a brief summary of key topics and recommended steps with the Ask-A coordinator. The overall goals were to improve our Ask-A service, identify accessibility issues in terms of both electronic and physical access issues and user access needs, recommend different language or solutions for Ask-A staff to use when handling specific issues, and report quarterly on notable trends at the larger Assessment Advisory Committee meetings. We aimed to identify inaccurate or misleading messaging and language that wasn't inclusive, as well as take note of any trends in the questions that were being asked, technical issues, or user experience. During the pandemic, Ask-A Chat was in high demand as it was the only way for patrons to gain access to library assistance. Beginning in March of 2020, the libraries were closed to the public and transitioned to almost fully remote operations. A study conducted by Judith Coons at the University of Central Florida and Sarah Dockeray at Valencia College examined trends in chat services at Florida libraries before, during, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. They found that the number of chats increased 121% from 2019 to 2020, and remained similarly high in 2021. Our analysis of ASCA transcripts took place over the 2021-2022 academic year, during which the libraries went through multiple systems migrations. We migrated to a new integrated library system, ALMA, in the summer of 2021, which resulted in a change in discovery layer for our users from a dual catalog and EBSCO discovery layer to Primo. In fall of 2021, the library website also migrated from a homegrown system to a WordPress platform, which was more accessible, but was a big change for our users. And in early 2022, Yoast digital collections were also migrated to a new platform with new searching capabilities. While all of this was going on, subgroups of the Assessment Advisory Committee were also making continuous website improvements from various usability testing projects, and updates were being made to COVID restrictions, such as building capacity, study room availability, and technology lending restrictions. And Christy will now tell you more about how our group approached this project.
Thank you, Pauline. In order to identify trends in the types of questions our Ask-A-Librarian attendants were being asked, the team conducted a monthly review of the anonymized chat transcripts, working with up to 100 unique transcripts each month. The first step was to remove attendant and patron information. Any problem interactions were identified so they could be reported to the assistant dean, though we were fortunate enough not to have to use this contingency. Once the transcripts were cleaned up, they were added to an Excel file and assigned to the committee members for review, with the goal of completing the review within 2 weeks of receipt of the anonymized transcripts. The team kept open communication with the assessment librarian, the dean of assessment, and the Ask-A-Librarian coordinator. As trends began to emerge, the team drafted a list of recommendations that could improve not only the Ask-A service, but also address information or services that were at the base of the common questions. In order to identify trends, a system of codification was created for reviewers to identify key aspects of the transactions. 5 main subject areas of the primary question were identified, with more specific subcategories under each different topic heading as needed. The 5 main topics of questions we identified were access to resources, questions about library policy, those seeking assistance with their research, technology services provided by the library, and finally, questions that were not library specific, rather more general questions about life and processes at UF as an institution. The second main category of codification identified were the barriers that prevented the patron from completing the task or getting the information they needed. Lack of knowledge on the patron's part was the most common barrier, but others included functionality of various platforms, such as our website, the catalog, or technology, unavailability of resources, use of physical library space, and needing specific topic assistance or contact information. Reviewers rated each transaction as to whether or not the attendant was able to provide a satisfactory response to the patron's question. In areas where the reviewer identified a response that could have been improved to provide a better resolution, they included notes. The key criteria was whether the patron's problem was solved and relied heavily on the knowledge of the attendant. While reviewing the transcript, the teams always kept in mind that it was our library staff member behind each interaction. Our goal was not to judge anyone for how they handled a question, but to identify training opportunities or improvements to resources that might bring consistency to the service a patron receives by an attendant, or even to remove the need for the patron to ask the question in the first place. Here are 2 examples of how the individual transcripts were reviewed using our coding system. These are from the first month of the project, September 2021. In the first example, the patron is looking for a specific resource. The Ask-A attendant provided them with a permalink to the title in the library catalog. After a period where the patron no longer responded to, "Can I help you with anything else?" the attendant provided a quick, courteous sign-off. The main topic for this interaction was access, code 100. The main barrier was the patron not knowing how to find a book in the catalog. The solution provided met the patron's needs, and the information the attendant provided was accurate and clear, and they were given a 4 out of 4, great response. The reviewer had no recommendations to improve the interaction. In the second example, the patron was having difficulty logging into our VPN, which would allow them access to library materials from an off-campus location. The patron provided the information, and there was a pause before the attendant replied based on the patron's "hello?" The information the attendant provided directed the patron to a different department on campus and a brief sign-off with an apology. The topic for the interaction was coded with the category Technology, VPN, or 408. The main barrier was the same as the topic in this instance. The reviewer indicated that the attendant did not provide a satisfactory resolution to the query, handing them off to another unit without solving the problem, and rated the overall interaction as a 2 out of 4, or some knowledge, but problem wasn't solved. Based on this interaction, the reviewer had insight as to what the underlying problem may have been, two-factor authentication, and provided an alternate route the attendant could have taken. Further, the reviewer identified an opportunity for additional training for Ask-A staff on the VPN and common problems and solutions surrounding that. It is rare that a project sticks to its original parameters through to the end, and that is true of our Ask-A-Librarian transcript review. This slide details changes that occurred over the life of the project. And as I was one of the newer additions to the team project, or the project team, I'm going to defer to Pauline, who is on the project since the very beginning, to get into more detail.
Thank you, Christy. We didn't assign qualitative codes to the topics until about halfway through the project. With the guidance of UF's assessment librarian, Laura Spears, I assigned numerical codes to each category and subcategory and created a summary spreadsheet that would automatically tally the topics, barriers, yes or no answers, and ratings from each month. For the first few months of the project, committee members were typing the text version of the code into the spreadsheet, which resulted in a lot of manual labor in switching it over to numbers that could be more easily categorized and totaled. Knowing what we know now about creating data summaries in Excel, if we could go back in time, we would have started the project using those numerical codes, as it was very difficult to recategorize the data manually due to human error and different styles of typing the codes. In early 2022, we began using a drop-down menu in the transcript spreadsheets that incorporated both the code name and the number. So when we were ready to create that month's summary, we could do a simple remove text function for the entire column, leaving only numbers, which would then feed into the formulas on the summary page. In early 2022, I examined the data we had collected so far and began narrowing our list of topics. The list had grown from when we first started. Folks were adding topics as needed, but the inconsistency made it difficult to analyze the data over time. I shortened our list of topics from 57 to 34 by consolidating some categories, such as research search and research sources, into one overarching research category, and deleting others that were very specific and had only been used 1 or 2 times, such as access microwave. When I deleted or combined a code, I returned to prior transcripts and corrected the code accordingly so that we would be able to accurately compare data over the course of the entire project. After that point, our committee used the more general categories when something didn't fit a specific subcategory, rather than creating a new subcategory for it. To best analyze the data, in the master analysis spreadsheet, we created a summary spreadsheet for each month, which automatically counts the number of each topic, barrier, and rating per month. A larger summary tab tallies totals from all of the months from September to April and calculates a percentage. In a separate tab, we listed all recommendations by month separated from the transcripts and highlighted particularly unsatisfactory or particularly impressive responses in orange or green. One of the larger themes we noticed in our data summaries was a significant percentage of the barriers were marked as patron knowledge. In hindsight, this category was probably too general for our barriers list. We used it to indicate whether the patron was asking a question that they could have quickly found the answer for themselves. For example, if a patron asked us if we had a book, but could have easily looked it up in the library catalog. However, we realized that it's expected that many of the questions patrons ask in Ask-A might have what we would view as an easy answer. The Ask-A pop-up on the library website appears within seconds of a user visiting the site, and they may choose to ask their question rather than looking for the answer themselves for ease of use. Additionally, it is difficult to quantify what type of answer we expect a patron to be able to find on their own, and that criteria may differ among different committee members. One of the patterns we noted was a high percentage of access questions, which included asking how to find electronic and physical resources, access issues such as missing content or broken links, and more general access questions such as the availability of a certain title. Two significant subcategories in particular were the VPN, both in the access and technology categories, and access study rooms. The number of questions about study rooms and the VPN were significant. And I'll turn it back over to Christy to show a different visualization of the data.
That's fun. I unmuted and then remuted myself. For those of you who are more visual, the pie chart on the right shows the breakdown of the barriers identified in the transcript reviews. Nearly 56% of all transactions had patron knowledge as the main barrier. Requires research assistance was the second most common at 10.5%, followed by patrons who were unable to access various types of content and services. The detailed analysis from the page before looked at each distinct topic within the 5 main categories. While research was the single most assigned topic for the transcripts, the perspective changes when looking at the 5 main categories identified. In the graph on the left, you can see that the questions regarding access were the most prevalent. This includes not only the main catch-all category of access, but also each of the 15 subcategories, which were assigned to specific material types, such as access article, access database, and access VPN. Let me now turn it over to Doug, who will go into further detail on the findings of these transcript reviews and what questions still lay ahead of us.
Thank you, Christy. As Pauline and Christy mentioned earlier, part of our subcommittee's charge was to find trends, topics, and questions that stood out frequently in the chat sessions we analyzed. Following that, we were asked to then create a list of suggestions for the Ask-A-Librarian team leaders. One of the first recommendations was to create a revised web page exclusively for the UF VPN. The University of Florida has 2 ways for users to authenticate to the library's resources, and it is confusing to all of us staff, as well as students and faculty, knowing which connection is which. In addition, over the course of the past couple of years, UF has also implemented dual authentication for most connections to UF resources overall. As a result, our library web pages needed updating to help all users navigate and understand the difference. During the fall 2021 semester, we saw a large volume of questions in the chat sessions about how to make reservations for study rooms in the various branch library locations on the UF campus. The policies page and the actual place where users could make a reservation were in separate places. It was difficult for both users and library employees to quickly find information they needed about how to secure a study room. We suggested that the policies should be incorporated into booking links, as we felt patrons were unlikely to scroll and click another link to view policies separately before making a booking. We also suggested a consolidation of information for all branch policies, since they all appeared to be the same. The fall semester 2021 did account for the greatest volume of chat traffic during the academic year that we analyzed, fall 2021 to spring 2022. So we recommended that Ask-A team increase training just before the start of each fall semester in the future, so that they can incorporate new information and be ready to put changes into effect in time for the upsurge in activity when school begins in August. Some of the details of our suggested training turned out to be more or less a set of best practices that might be incorporated. These were some of the ideas that we gleaned from analyzing the chat transcripts. We suggested that Ask-A staff use permalinks to resources whenever possible, rather than copying and pasting a URL from the browser session they were using. The browser URLs are often extremely long and filled with coding that might not translate into a successful link when it is popped into a chat session. Permalinks, on the other hand, are specifically designed to shorten the URL to only include the necessary information to bring a user right to the article, journal, database, or web page that they may be trying to access. Since our analysis started last fall 2021, there were numerous sessions started by new undergrads just starting at UF These chat users were often doing an assignment for a class and were asking about how to begin the process. For example, as with many English 11 and 101 classes, a professor may give a broad assignment to do a research at the library, come up with peer-reviewed resources on a given subject, and then write a paper. In these cases, our team recommended that Ask-A-Librarian staff direct these first-level students to start with Primo, the University of Florida's discovery layer and catalog, rather than try to find a specific and appropriate multidisciplinary database and guide them all the way through what could be a rather lengthy investigative process of the library's website and resources. Some of the most successful chat sessions appeared to be when the Ask-A staff member did an initial Primo search with search terms for the user and then described how it was done. Many of the students were just asking where to start, and then they could take it from there. After all, this kind of use of Primo is a transferable skill for their future research. On the other hand, some of the users in the chat session were in a much more advanced level of their research and were having trouble narrowing down or finding where to obtain the information they know exists in the digital collections or the universe of resources that UF subscribes to. In these cases, we saw from the transcripts that staff would often eventually point the researcher to the right place or direction, but the success of the interaction remained a bit ambiguous. When researchers left the chat session with a subject specialist contact to help them take a deeper dive into what they were looking for, they were more likely to feel their needs had been met in the chat session. Because some of the back and forth communication in a chat session can be somewhat nuanced too, we suggested that library Ask-A staff focus on customer service oriented responses. For example, it is better for Ask-A staff to ask users if they are familiar with a term or if they need an explainer. It usually helps to also define library jargon and services so that users don't have to ask. Use positive language and make people feel valued. You know the old saying, there's no stupid questions really. And then when referring users to research guides from other libraries, Ask-A staff should note that the user should access the same resources through UF's Primo, the UF database A to Z list, or another UF link. The guides from other universities or libraries may include resources that UF does not subscribe to and would often be proxied for the other universities' IP ranges. They would then hit a paywall, of course. Along the same suggestion, we question the wisdom of guiding users to free resources such as ResearchGate or Sci-Hub, where any user can upload content. However, suggesting Google Scholar as an alternative when ILL is not possible, or if they need an article immediately, that could be an option. So over the life of this project, we did take note of some of the differences in communication when comparing in-person, email, or assistance by phone. As can be expected, the chat sessions are being used more and more by students and faculty at the university. So it is incumbent on the library staff to learn and keep up with trends and communication styles that can change quickly due to the rapid technology advancement. Social cues and expectations change along with the outside library world. The pace of chat sessions is still being gauged in a way, so that quick spur-of-the-moment guidance may be expected from users in chat now. Targeted links are valued from users, especially in chat sessions, since this is the main form of quick guidance from the library staff. And ideally, these should be ready and available for the staff in maybe a quick reference list of links, especially made for chat sessions. We also gleaned that it's pretty important for Ask-A staff to know our own contacts in UF libraries. The University of Florida is such a large institution, and the library faculty and staff is on the larger side as well. Being familiar with subject librarians and specialists can make referrals more seamless and smoother over chat, especially when there is a peak demand or when the volume of chat sessions creates a queue. Triage can be a real challenge at these times. So we do still have some questions about what directions this type of chat transcript analysis might lead us. A few future areas of research might be, how do students and faculty users of Ask-A influence the communication styles of library staff as they interact through the chat service? And at what pace does this change occur? but by semester, by academic year? How might library staff develop new strategies to meet changing user expectations of chat sessions? How quickly and at what pace do libraries need to update and change their sites and procedures? AI, could this chat reference analysis be automated? What would the advantages and challenges be? There's a big push at the University of Florida to incorporate AI into many of the programs of the university, including the Smathers Libraries at the University of Florida. How well could this work if we were to attempt this? So this concludes our presentation portion of our time with you, but we look forward to sharing maybe a few more details in the Q&A session that is to follow. Thank you for attending.